Welcome to the Toronto Urban Studies Centre Greenhouse. Your class will be coming here soon to participate in the program Exploring Structures, Lessons from Nature. You will be guiding your students through Station 3, Take a Stand. This station is all about columns. When you bring your students in to sit around the table, you're going to see a sheet in front of them that has a big idea on it and an agenda for the station. Please have the students carefully read through the big idea. The stem of a plant has to be strong enough to support itself and the load of any additional leaves and or branches. In addition, the stem has to be flexible enough to withstand natural forces like wind. How do plants, stems / tree trunks manage to be strong and yet flexible? You're then going to take a few minutes to discuss this big idea with the students. I like to present them with this model and ask them what geometric shape it is. And of course, it's a cylinder. I then ask them to think like engineers and tell me what kind of structure it is. And of course, it's a column. I then ask them to look at it as a botanist, and they will tell me that it is a plant stem or a tree trunk. Now, what would we need to add to this in order to make it an actual plant? And the students are going to tell us, of course, that we need to add branches and leaves. We always take a moment to remind students that the reason we have leaves, of course, is for photosynthesis, breathing, and transpiration. The weight or the load from the branches and the leaves are going to be pushing down on the trunk. What force is that? And we're hoping that the students will be able to tell us at this point that it is in fact compression. Now, trees are fairly strong in compression. What other forces might act on that particular tree trunk? And of course, we're looking for wind, and that's going to have tension and compression as the tree responds to that force. Now, you're going to be taking some measurements of tree trunks. You're going to be, or plant stems, and you're going to be looking for flexibility as well as rating the load that that particular stem is expected to carry. And then the students will be coming back to the table to look at the inside of the different columns and see how in fact they're being built. So the students will all receive a worksheet on a clipboard that looks like this. Each student gets their own recording sheet. You have them fill in their name and their group number, and then you're going to show them quickly how to fill in their sheet. So they're going to visit each of 4 plants: the horsetail, the Japanese water lily, the peace lily, and the rose of China. They're going to be using a special device called a caliper to measure the stem's diameter. And then they're going to be using a rating scale for stem flexibility, and again a rating scale for the load or the weight from the leaves and the branches. And then they'll come back and they'll circle the appropriate cross-section once they've looked at the inside of the plant stem. To use the caliper, there's a little instruction sheet that they can follow through. It shows them that the caliper is in fact just a special ruler that's been designed for measuring cylindrical objects. This particular caliper has a scale in millimeters from 0 to 150. It has 2 jaws, one that is fixed and one that slides back and forth. When you're measuring, you bring it up to the cylinder that you're measuring. You slide the jaws open, you bring them around the object, you slide the movable jaw in so that you're giving the cylinder a bit of a hug, and then you can carefully read it. I'm going to just slip this up to make it easier for you to see it. You're looking at the 0 on the movable jaw, and you're coming up from the 0 to read the calipers, and you'll find that the diameter for this specific cylinder happens to be 56 millimeters. Now, you want the students to have time to practice the skill of using the calipers, so you're going to give each partnership a caliper and 2 branches to practice with, and you want them to each take a turn measuring the different branches and discussing their results. This gives you an opportunity to go around and make sure that they're using them accurately. The most common problem the students have is remembering to measure up from the 0 as opposed to simply the edge of that movable jaw. Now we're going to take you around and introduce you to the 4 plants. You'll send partners to each of the plants and then have them rotate. So I'm going to start by taking you right here to our Rose of China. You're going to use the calipers to measure the diameter of the stem. Then you're going to rate the flexibility of the stem. So always go over this with the students. One hand on the bottom, one hand on the top, and just see if you can bend the stem at all. And you'll find that, in fact, the Rose of China is not flexible. And then you're going to have the students look at the load. And if you look at this particular plant, the Rose of China actually has a very heavy load. The second plant I'm going to introduce you to is the Peace Lily. And again, you want the students to get in with their calipers and measure it close to the bottom. If you'll look and you hold it and do a quick check, you'll find it's not very flexible. And if you look at the load, it's got several leaves coming off of one main stem, so it actually has a somewhat heavy load. This plant is sitting down here on the ledge. I recommend that you actually bring it up to the table for the students to work at so they're not blocking the path. I'm going to walk you over to the next two plants. They're on the opposite side of the table, so the children are spread out. The first one we'll look at here is the horsetail. And again, pick an average stem to use your calipers on. And then again, rate flexibility. So hold it in one hand, hold it in the other, give it a little bit of a bend. And you can see that this plant is in fact very flexible. And again, if you look, that's the leaf structure on this plant. So there's almost no load. It's a very, very light load on the column. The final plant that we're going to have a look at here is called the Japanese water lily. And again, take an average stem, measure it with your calipers, check for flexibility. This one is flexible, not quite as flexible as the horsetail. And of course, it has a light load, having only one leaf. Now this plant is tucked in over here. If you'd prefer, you'll notice that there's also a Japanese water lily over in our pond. And you can have the students come and work at it right here in the pond itself. You want to have them come back to the table to fill in the final column where they're looking at the cross sections. Again, we need to look at a brand new tool. These are called hand lenses. When you open it up, you'll notice that there are in fact two magnifying lenses. You want to pair those up so they overlap each other. The little projection here you place on the bridge of your nose, and you close the opposite eye, and you take this cross section that you're looking at and you bring it up to your eye until you can see it comfortably and clearly. Each student will have their own hand lens, and then you're going to pass around the four cross sections for the students to work with. So there's the Rose of China, the Peace Lily, the horsetail, and the Japanese water lily. Each of these cups will be labeled for you to make it easier for the students to share. Just make sure that they are keeping track of the plant that they're actually looking at and making the correct choice based on the plant's name. Or when the students have completed their worksheet, you're going to hand them out this little overview sheet. The first page gives you information about the four plants that we've studied and reinforces the observations the students have made and gives us a few ideas about why a particular plant might be more or less flexible than another. For example, the horsetail grows in wetland ponds. It can be very windy, the water is constantly moving, the plant needs to be able to bend and flex under those conditions. Whereas a plant like the Rose of China grows in a more wooded area where the other trees are there to block the wind, it doesn't need to be as flexible. It can put more energy into branching out. Then you'll have this read through the back page. It takes a look at engineering and how we as humans have learned from our plants. So it looks at a flagpole and it looks at a column that's being used to support a bridge and looks at the different designs used. And if you have a look at the back of the student sheet, it has a few questions asking the students to compare photo 1 and photo 2 to the plants they've studied and explain why they think photo 1 looks like a horsetail and why they think photo 2 looks more like the peace lily. After having filled out that, you can show them some other adaptations or designs that plants have. For example, over on the far bench, there are several cacti laid out. This particular one has made itself into a cone as opposed to a proper cylinder. It is much wider on the base, and that is one strategy that's been adapted. you'll find little wedge-shaped plants. They're called buttresses coming out of the side of the plant. And in fact, they are also there to make the plant more stable and sturdy. And this will come up when you're looking at the engineering program. It relates, in the computer lab, it relates to trusses, but also if you ask them to think about a building in downtown Toronto that's actually made up of 3 of these buttresses, and of course they're going to immediately think of the CN Tower, and it is a very strong, sturdy, and yet flexible structure built from this design idea. And then you can give them a few minutes to look at question 2, which asks them to describe some other designs that they've seen in plants that help to make it a strong and sturdy structure. At that point in time, we'll be moving on. You have approximately 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes to get through this station. And when you're complete, you're going to collect any of the plastic covered pages from the students, and you're going to send them on to the next station with their paper and their pencil and their clipboard. Thank you, and we really appreciate your cooperation in presenting Station 3, Take a Stand.